In 2015, Illinois Congressman Aaron Schock resigned amid a federal investigation into his high-spending lifestyle, triggered after the Washington Post wrote about his expensive office decorations inspired by Downton Abbey, the British drama about an aristocratic mansion. In 2016, a grand jury indicted Schock on 24 felony counts, alleging he abused his government and campaign accounts, committed wire fraud and mail fraud, falsified FEC filings, stole government funds, made false statements, and filed a false tax return, charges that carried years in prison. But yesterday, prosecutors dropped those charges, cutting a deal that Schock must pay back taxes to the IRS, return $68,000 to his campaign fund, and have his campaign committee plead guilty to a misdemeanor count of failing to report expenses. The deal leaves Schock with a clean record. And former Republican Congressman Aaron Schock joins us now.
Good
well,
morning.
That's quite an intro.
It is. It's been quite a 4 years.
So explain to us, did you take responsibility, first of all, for what went wrong in your office?
I do, and I did 4 years ago when I left office. I said that I failed to live to the high bar that I had set in my own office. I was very focused outwardly on, serving the 205 towns I represented, legislative work in Capitol Hill, running around the country campaigning for candidates, and I should have done a better job overseeing the use of my campaign and government funds. And I said then I wanted to seek restitution and making amends for whatever mistakes occurred, but I also said that I was confident that neither I nor anyone in my staff committed any purposeful crimes. Nobody was trying to put money in their pocket or do anything wrong. And so the government started investigating me for 2 years. When the government realized that was the case, that there were no crimes, they then branched into everything related to my life. They used 30 federal agents. They subpoenaed over 100 witnesses and flew them into Springfield, Illinois to testify in the grand jury. Everything from my mother, my brother, my sister, my father, to all of my good friends, to my business associates that I bought a house from when I was 18, all the way up to my current business associates out in California who I'd never even worked with until I left Congress. And it became a massive fishing expedition in the pursuit to try to find anything that they could charge me with. And when they did charge me, they charged me with 24 felonies, 80 to 100 years in prison, and your life immediately shrinks. People that you thought were friends aren't.
Right.
Your opportunities to make a living and support yourself shrink. And frankly, in America, it's not the presumption of innocence.
I want to ask, how old were you when you were elected?
To which office? 19 to the school board, 23 to the state legislature, and 27 to Congress.
Okay. And we got a lot of young people starting out, one in the midterms. I'm just wondering, what can you speak to in terms of what happened, toward what went wrong? What happened in your head? What happened that led to putting yourself in this situation? I understand you have some issues with a lot of things, but what about your role?
Yeah.
And where do you think you became misguided or got caught up? What went wrong?
Well, I think two things. One, there were mistakes that I could have done a better job of overseeing my office. I also think when you are the youngest member of Congress, as I was, and you're very high profile, as I was, and you do things that are non-traditional, by the way, that aren't illegal, being on the cover of Men's Health gets you a lot of attention, right? Being one of the first members of Congress 10 years ago that was on Instagram gets you a lot of attention, right? Now some of that stuff is not as sizzly, right? People post photos with their friends on vacation or whatever on social media. I was one of the first people doing that. And so the traditional media latched onto that. So when you're high profile, anything you do obviously attracts more attention. And so people said, oh, he's flying around on private planes. Yes. But so does most of the elected leadership in Congress, right? And so when I flew to 42 congressional districts in the month of October before I resigned, it was for other candidates, and it was perfectly legal. But some in the press corps said, wait a minute, what's this youngest member of Congress flying around to 42 congressional districts doing? So, there's some things I would do differently. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have been on the cover of Men's Health. Maybe I should have posted some of the things. But I would also say this, Mika, some of that also allowed me to do things other members of Congress couldn't do. I could meet with most of the CEOs in America because they said, hey, that's the youngest guy. I saw him on the cover of Men's Health. And that may sound shallow, but the reality is if you want to stand out and you want to make a difference, you got to be a little bit different than those in the pack.
Yeah.
Joe?
So Aaron, I think, goes on the government's health, too, is the
No.
new face of obesity. Now, the new face of obesity,
Not a big
what it looks
seller,
like.
that much.
Lot of warning. That was one of the
good, Joe.
lower selling. Yeah, exactly. This is your future, my friend. So, but Aaron, let me ask you now really quickly. They dropped charges against you after you were dragged through the mud for 4 years. They dropped, and you've taken responsibility. But Ted Stevens was charged and really wasn't vindicated until after he died. You could say John Edwards went through hell before they dropped those charges. Bob McDonnell went through hell before the feds dropped charges against him as well. I think we're seeing a trend here where the feds throw everything at elected leaders. They don't have what it takes to bring it to a conclusion, and then they tell them to go on their way after destroying their lives.
Right. Well, a couple things that I learned in this process. One, prosecutors, federal prosecutors, have something that members of Congress don't enjoy, not even police officers enjoy, and that is absolute and complete immunity in their job. And that is why the lead prosecutor in my case has been proven and to have lied in my case before the court. And that's not my opinion. The judge found that he has lied. This was 2 years ago, and the same prosecutor is still employed by the Justice Department. The same prosecutor is still prosecuting. Now, you and I would not only not be prosecuting, would not have our jobs, we would be prosecuted by the Justice Department. So what is the message that the Justice Department says when they don't hold their own prosecutors to the same law and the same standards by which they hold every other American? The second is the grand jury process is a black box, and the only people in there are grand jurors who frankly tend to be a little clueless about the law, and the prosecutor and a court reporter. Not even a judge sees what's going on in there. And the second violation we know that this slew of prosecutors did is they violated my Fifth Amendment rights during this process 11 different times on 11 different days. And the only reason we know that is because one of the grand jurors actually broke grand jury secrecy and told his banker in my community, who then told me, and I told my attorney, and the government tried to deny it at first, but we would have never known that had I not been a high-profile person in my community, and this person was shocked that the prosecutor was doing it. We need transparency in the grand jury process. We need some sunlight in that process because that's really how you cut down on some of the malfeasance that's occurred in my case, and you mentioned Stevens and others.
So, Aaron, you were indicted on 24 felonies. As you say, these are very serious cases. These are not parking tickets. We're talking about it. If you were convicted, you would have gone to jail for the rest of your life. And then all of a sudden, the federal prosecutors dropped every one of those charges after years of looking into them. Were you, number one, surprised that they dropped all of them? And number two, what's your understanding of why they so quickly wiped everything off the board and let you go?
Well, I would argue that it wasn't so quickly.
Well, no, I mean, that day when they came to you and said, forget it all, just pay the back taxes and you walked, that happened pretty suddenly.
Right, you're right. And what I would say rhetorically is you don't take 24 felonies and dismiss all 24 felonies if you think you can get somebody on 4 or 5 or 6 felonies, right? So it is a complete repudiation of the case that was launched against me. But the sad reality is they didn't give up. The first prosecutor was removed for lying. The second prosecutor was removed for violating my Fifth Amendment constitutional rights. I mean, this is why I'm in year 4. This is why it's cost me over $4.5 million, right? And so I've been through 3 sets of prosecutors before they finally say, you know what, never mind. And, you know, people ask me, now what? What are you going to do with the rest of your life? Well, it's the first morning I've woken up today that I'm not facing 80 to 100 years in prison. So am I excited about that? Sure. Am I a little bitter about what has happened to me over the last couple of years? I think any American would. And I think what you have to ask yourself is, our justice system should not be about, oh, is he a Republican or a Democrat, or do I like him or I don't like him? I got no problem with the political arena that I entered in and people writing bad things about me in the press or my Democratic colleagues attacking me because I'm a Republican on this policy or that policy. But when you try and take somebody's liberty away, that's a problem. And I told my attorney this. I said, you know what, I served in Congress. Some people might say Congress is broken. You know what that means? They don't get anything done. You know what a broken justice system does? It takes people's liberty and life. And you can call me nostalgic, but those are 2 things our country was founded on. And if we don't do something to fix our criminal justice system, we should all be worried.
What are you going to do now?
Well, I've actually gotten some text messages from former colleagues who've said, hey, come talk to us because we'd like to know what you think we should be doing to reform the system. And I feel responsible to at least share my story and try and make some reforms so that this doesn't happen to more people. As far as my life, I don't know. I think I'm still a young man at 37 years old, so now that I'm not a alleged felon, I think there will probably be more opportunities that I can explore.
Keep us posted. Aaron Schock, former Congressman Aaron Schock, thank you very much for coming on this morning.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.